Check this out. This is the actual document from supremecourt.gov. They say state of Texas plaintiff versus the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, state of Georgia, state of Michigan, and state of Wisconsin defendants. I don't want to read all of these states. I'm going to read all these states, okay? Motion for leave to file and brief for the District of Columbia and the states and territories of California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Guam, Hawaii, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Nevada, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, North Carolina, Oregon, Rhode Island, Vermont, Virginia, U.S. Virgin Islands, Washington, have all are now party in opposition to Texas, and they basically just say that, they have the right to, they're asserting their right to join the defendants, I suppose, and issue a statement on their behalf. So, that's about it in terms of the breaking news, but we do have the direct response from these states. This is from AMNY. States respond to Texas Trumpists' Supreme Court lawsuit seeking to throw out the results of the U.S. election. For those that aren't familiar with what Texas is requesting, Texas said that these 4 states that I listed as the defendants have violated the Electors Clause of the Constitution, which states the state legislatures have the ultimate authority in who decides, the elections and who the electors are. But in these states, the courts overruled in certain circumstances, or the governors implemented new rules without permission or confirmation from the legislatures. Therefore, and for a variety of other reasons, I'm not going to get into the full breakdown of what their lawsuit is. They're basically saying Texas and all 17 states now either supporting or asking to intervene to join are saying that the state legislatures should be the ones who choose the electors. They're Republican state legislatures. They would very likely vote for Trump, or perhaps they would abstain. And if they did, Joe Biden would not reach 270 electoral votes. We would likely move to a contingent election based on House delegations in which Donald Trump would win. Oh, of course, if they chose their electors, Trump would win. So these other states are basically saying no, and now we have half the country lining up against the other half, arguing about who the next president is supposed to be. I wonder how that will play out. But the 4 states had to issue their response by today, and they did. And so AM New York says 4 U.S. states that President Donald Trump lost in the November 3rd election on Thursday began to file court papers opposing a long-shot Republican-backed lawsuit filed by Trump-supporting Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton in the Lone Star State's name at the Supreme Court, seeking to undo President-elect Joe Biden's victory. I like how they say it's just in Texas's name. It's like not actually Texas doing it. Officials from Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin already have called the lawsuit, which aims to throw out the results, a reckless attack on democracy. The Supreme Court gave the 4 states a 3 p.m. EST deadline to file court papers. Pennsylvania was the first to file, with the state's Democratic Attorney General Josh Shapiro saying that the Texas lawsuit was adding a cacophony of bogus false claims about the election. Quote, what Texas is doing in this proceeding is to ask this court to reconsider a mass of baseless claims about problems with the election that have already been considered and rejected by this court and other courts. The lawsuit is supported by Trump and 17 other states. The Republican president has falsely claimed he won re-election and has made baseless allegations of widespread voting fraud. State election officials have said they found no evidence of such fraud. I want to stop there. Can I ask you about that?
About the lawsuit?
Well, just about the state election officials saying they found no evidence of such fraud. Is there anything you can comment in that regard? Because I don't want to.
I'm not going to comment. I'm going to question. I'm going to question is what did they do to find it? What efforts did they make to discover it? Because if I close my eyes and you come here and take my drink and I don't see you do it, I don't have any evidence you took it because I closed my eyes, right?
But if I'm sitting there drinking that Red Bull.
Yeah. That's my question is that what evidence can they provide that they applied scrutiny to what happened? And of course you didn't find anything if you didn't look for it. It's rarely is it so blatant. It takes a lot of effort. And our own little independent project, we crowdfunded about $580,000 to sort of fund it on our own using very, tools that were available to us. Why wasn't the state doing this? What scrutiny did they apply to detect this?
I'm actually shocked by a lot of these court cases where, I think in Nevada, the Trump campaign presented actual evidence and the court just said, get out of my courtroom. They didn't care. They didn't even want to look at what was given to them. And then what we end up seeing is officials say there was no evidence. There was none. I liken it to, if I said, hey, you guys want to play hide and seek? And then everyone goes and hides. And then I'm like, you guys won, just like literally right away. Well, I couldn't find you. It's like, You didn't even get out of your chair. I couldn't find you. To what degree am I obligated? I don't know if you saw, have you been following the lawsuits at all from the Trump campaign?
Well, I've been involved with some of them, so.
Right. So of course, but the ones not involving, your project or whatever. One of the things that I just want to say, and feel free to comment on what you can or can't, just ignore. But in Pennsylvania, a judge ruled that the election law in Pennsylvania says there has to be observers, and Trump's campaign said the observers weren't allowed near the ballots. So how are they observing? And the judge goes, well, I don't know. The law doesn't specify distance. So as long as they're in the building, it's good, which is clearly not good faith or to the spirit of the law is supposed to do. And that's the gist of what we've been seeing across the board. So this whole thing is freaking me out, to be honest. Now that we're seeing all of these states line up, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm going to put it this way. These 20 states and 2 territories that are saying, oh, we reject this. It's these 4 states have said it's an attack on democracy. It doesn't even matter what their opinion on this is, because they're not going to change the minds of 18 other states. We're at a point now where 18 states have said definitively Biden should not be president. I should say effectively said Biden should not be president, or that the Constitution has been violated. Texas's lawsuit says either the Constitution matters or it's just a parchment sitting in the National Archives. That's a powerful statement with 17 states signing on in support of it, some actually asking to intervene to be listed as plaintiffs in the case, in which case, if the Supreme Court refuses to hear this, then these 17 states have already asserted that would be a declaration the Constitution is meaningless. And these other states could effectively say the same thing. If the Supreme Court can say no to this election, Joe Biden isn't going to be president because we've ruled it, they'll argue it's the exact same thing. So that's why I just look at this and I'm like, ultimately it doesn't matter what this one judge said. People have been lining up and they know they're right on both sides. They both say they're right. I happen to think one side is more right than the other. Obviously, we all have our biases, but everyone thinks they're right.
Right. And, there are many causes to this, but one, I think the major contributor to all of this is how badly the states manage elections. We've been very lucky because historically many elections are won by somebody by a pretty good sized margin. And what happens is when there's a good enough margin, the mismanagement is covered up, right? It's concealed. But when the margins are close, sometimes that mismanagement comes in other, variety of things. It could be creating clerical errors or preventing potential fraud. So, for example, there's really very little authentication done on mail-in ballots, essentially zero, and very little authentication done on election day ballots. We had James O'Keefe show up in D.C. and take the Attorney General's ballot. They gave it to him. Said, "Hey, I'm the Attorney." They used his name.
Was that this time around, or?
Oh, it was a couple of cycles back, but
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So the election system has, right or wrong, created a space for suspicion to burn like a wildfire because it's so badly managed. And here's something to think about, right? Potholes on the highway, right? We're kind of used to the government maybe not doing the best job of that. Your mail getting lost. We're kind of Postal Service. This is always a joke. It's a punchline, right? Or let's say your Medicare not paying a bill that it should pay, and you have to fight with them. We're all used to that. But one thing that I don't think a democracy can survive is that kind of government, those kinds of bad management within the election system, or with that kind of incompetence in the election system, because that's the thing that allows us to potentially fix all of these other problems. So we're okay with maybe the potholes don't get fixed, or maybe they mismanage a hurricane, which is horrific, right? But the means we have to fix those problems is the election system. So, but if that is deemed broken, well, then you're stuck. Then you can't fix any problem beyond it.
I always say, if you want someone to be an anarchist, put him at the DMV for a week. And we saw that with the counting that was going on that showed states can't even count. They're taking breaks. What's going on here?
So let's address that, right? No. The left has said, the Democrats, the reason why it took longer to count votes after Election Day was because when people go and vote in person, they walk in, and then someone asks them their name, they're given their ballot, or they go to the machine and they type in things and they press enter. All of that's done right away. When an absentee vote is being counted, they grab the envelope, they look at it, they open it. It takes longer to go through the envelope than it is to have a person walk in, vote, and walk out. So the argument is, when a person walks in and votes and walks out, it's already in the tabulation machine. When they're going through absentee ballots, doing signature verification, it takes a bit longer to tabulate that vote. And thus, it took a lot longer. But what doesn't make sense, in my opinion, is then why they dumped all of these batches, really early in the morning at once. And it still took more than one day to do all of this, and these batches came in. So if you look at, I think, like November 4th at like 1 a.m, there were massive spikes. Well, if they were counting on election day as people came in, and they didn't start counting the ballots until election day, why do we have not the ballots being entered in at a certain point? I guess the argument is they were barred from doing it. I still don't think it makes sense as to how, in some circumstances, Trump received a tiny fraction of these mail-in ballot dumps. That's the big question that I think needs to be answered.
Right. And there was also legal arguments in Pennsylvania before the election asking the government to count the votes that were mailed in early. The government of Pennsylvania argued against that. And
that was Republicans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when we look at Florida, I think Florida is the most interesting case because we saw that they were caught with their pants down in 2000, and then they kind of updated their voting system, and they had the votes in right away. All these other states, we don't have one universal standard or one kind of voting machine or one kind of system to count the votes. And I think that's also something to really think about here.
I hear you, but each state runs their own election.
Exactly.
And I can respect that, but what I can't respect is, let me based off what you just said, let me give people an analogy. Would you be willing to get on an airplane if airlines had a 1% failure rate? 1%. I think the answer is a resounding no.
Well, there would be no airline industry in that scenario.
Because they'd be paying out lawsuits every day.
Well, because no one would fly.
Right.
I mean.
So New York Times reported in 2012 that the failure rate of mail-in and absentee voting is between 1 and 2%. If I told you there was a 1% chance that if you mailed in your vote, it would not count, well, I think a lot of people probably would be like, oh, whatever, I don't care. But that's a pretty bold bet to make, to not having your voice heard in your election. So when I saw that there was this, and this is a big part of the lawsuit going forward with Mike Kelly and Sean Parnell pertaining to the constitutionality of mail-in voting in Pennsylvania. There's a few weird things, but when I saw that all of these changes have been implemented a year in advance before COVID and then during COVID to have mass mail-in voting, I mean, we saw in Paterson, New Jersey, a whole election was thrown out. A judge actually ordered a new election in Paterson, New Jersey, because they found bundles of mail-in votes from a town over. We now have a whistleblower who's come out and said they drove a truckload of ballots from New York to Pennsylvania. I don't know if that's true. Witness testimony is often unreliable, but it is still evidence admitted in court. So it needs to be considered. It needs to be investigated. We need to look into these things and not just ignore them. And so I guess I throw it back to what you said earlier. How hard have any of these people actually looked into any of this stuff?
Right.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. We do the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. So come back to check us out when we go live. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and we are also available on all podcast platforms for free if you want to listen to us there. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all next time.